Good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing well today. This lecture will be about essay number 1. If you go to the assignments tab, and again, I know that your view will be different than mine, click on essay number 1 and you will find this information. This is the basic writing prompt, what I'm asking you to do, what I'm asking you to write about. We'll also look at Chapter 7 in our textbook, the most important information in Chapter 7, and we'll also look at Se Habla Español and how that essay is a good model for your own literacy narrative. So essay number 1, writing a literacy narrative. Construct a literacy narrative. Quite often a literacy narrative is an account of a situation that helps you develop as a reader and a writer. One such situation would be how the actions of a parent and or a teacher or anyone really had a significant effect on how you approach reading and writing today. In my own life, I've had pretty significant teachers. My grandmother taught me how to read. Write a narrative account of a particular situation or situations that you now understand had an influence on how you view reading, writing, and language use. So you are writing a personal narrative about how you have developed as a reader, as a writer, and as a user of language. Be sure to tell the story in detail, and we'll look at some other information and files that will help you get ideas for what to write. Explain how you now understand how that particular occurrence or these situations have shaped you as a reader and writer and user of language. And again, this essay should be about your own reading and writing process, how it's developed over time, how it continues to develop. The requirements, the specific requirements of the essay. This needs to be 1,300 to 1,500 words in length, which roughly translates into 4 or 5 typed pages, double-spaced. And again, following MLA format. View the other lecture that I posted on MLA format for that. Here is the rubric that I'll be using to grade your essays. I need to tweak it a little bit, but you should have a solid thesis. You should be well organized. You should have an identifiable introduction and conclusion. Paragraphs in the middle. The supporting evidence will be the details that you choose to include. The literacy events that you are writing about. Sentence structure, eliminating sentence fragments and run-ons. Word choice, using good words. Grammar, punctuation, mechanics, and usage. The required elements, including topic, page, word count, sources when required. This essay does not require outside resources. And then MLA format. So let's look at Chapter 7 in the Norton text, writing a literacy narrative. This is our topic for essay number 1. So narratives are stories, and we read and tell them for many different purposes. Writing students are often called upon to compose literacy narratives to explore their experiences with reading and writing. This chapter provides detailed guidelines for writing a literacy narrative, and the chapters always begin with these 4 essays, these examples, and they are good to read through, but I do prefer the essays that are at the end of the book, and that's why we focus on those, and we don't really focus on these. However, you can read through them to get a better idea of what I'm asking you to do. But on page 42, the textbook, and one of the reasons why I really like the Norton textbook, they identify key features of literacy narratives. One key feature is a well-told story. As with most narratives, those about literacy often set up some sort of situation that needs to be resolved. Tania Barrientos' essay, Se Habla Español, is a well-told story. She chooses details to include, she incorporates them well. Another key feature of literacy narratives is vivid detail. Details can bring a narrative to life for readers by giving them vivid mental sensations of the sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and textures of the world in which your story takes place. The details you use when describing something can help readers picture places, people, and events. Dialogue can help them hear what is being said. And we'll look at some of the details that Barrientos incorporates, and she uses dialogue. some indication of the narrative's significance. By definition, a literacy narrative tells something the writer remembers about learning to read or write or use language. In addition, the writer needs to make clear why the incident matters to him or her. And that is one of the most important parts. All three of these are important. A well-told story, vivid detail, and narrative significance. Why are the literacy narrative events that you are writing about, why are they important to you? Tania Barrientos, her essay, Se Habla Español, the narrative has significance for her as a reader and a writer and a user of language. And by the end of the essay, we come to understand that learning Spanish, the significance of that essay is that learning Spanish helps connect her to her culture. And we'll look at that essay in just a moment. A guide to writing literacy narratives, choosing topics, what is it that you can write about. We'll look at the formal outline. In general, it's a good idea to focus on a single event that took place during a relatively brief period of time. However, given the requirement of word count and length, you may need to choose 2 or 3 or 4 events that are related to your literacy development. So here in the text is addressed to a literacy narrative that is maybe 2 pages long. Ours is 4 to 5 pages. So you may have to focus on several events, but you should limit that to 4 events at the most, so that you can discuss each event in greater detail, in a more meaningful, significant way. That is, if you wrote about 10 literacy events, or if you try to write a 4 or 5 page essay from the time you were 3 years old and learned to read to the time that you enrolled in this English class, and that 18 years or more of experience with reading and writing, you could not adequately compress that into 4 or 5 pages. So rather than an essay that spans that amount of time, you should focus on specific literacy events in your life. So for example, an early memory about writing or reading that you recall vividly, someone who taught you to read or write, a book or other text that has been significant for you in some way, an event at school that was related to reading or writing and that you found interesting, humorous, or embarrassing, a writing or reading task that you found or still find especially difficult or challenging, the origins of your current attitudes about reading or writing. Any of these things or all of these things are things that you can address. And it's important that I mention that this does not have to be a positive. I hope that your experiences with reading and writing have been positive in general. But if they haven't, you should feel free to address that as well. Or any combination. If you have a couple of positive experiences and a couple of negative experiences, feel free to address those. This does not have to be just because I'm a professor of English. That doesn't mean that you have to present an essay that states that you love English. Okay? I just want to be clear about that. When we talk about vivid details, generating ideas in text, describe the setting. If you're writing about learning to read in 1st grade, describe the setting. Where did the narrative take place? Where did that part of your literacy narrative take place? Name the school. Give the city. What kind of school was it? Where was it located? How big was it? How small was it? If you can remember your teachers' names, name names. What did you see? What did it smell like? If you're inside, what color are the walls? What's hanging on them? What can you see out the windows? What else do you see? Are there books, lined paper? What do you hear? What do you smell? If you had a particular teacher, as I did, who had a particularly strong cologne, I could still smell Mr. Felsenfeld's cologne from 5th grade. Describe that. How and what do you feel? Are you nervous? Are you happy? What do you taste? I hope you're not licking the desk, but think about the people. Narratives include people whose actions play an important role in the story, and in fact, we'll look at Barrientos' essay in a second, but her essay begins with a conversation she had with when she's enrolling in a Spanish class. A good way to develop your understanding of the people in your narrative is to write about them, describe each person in a paragraph or so. What do the people look like? How do they dress? Again, name names. How do they speak? Do they speak quickly, slowly, with an accent? Do they speak clearly? Do they mumble? Do they use any distinctive words or phrases? You know, you can write that. Let's see, recall some dialogue. This says imagine some characteristic dialogue. Now listen, we're not making up these literacy events. These literacy events should be based in truth. However, if you have some gaps in your memory, you should fill in those gaps if it's important to help your reader understand what you're writing about. Consider the significance of the narrative. I can't emphasize enough that you need to have a significant point. How have these literacy events shaped you as a reader, writer, and user of language? You know, you need to make clear the ways in which any event you're writing about is significant for you now. Right? This is a page or so, you know, again, and you might write at the conclusion of each literacy event, you might discuss the significance of that particular event, or in the concluding paragraph or concluding paragraphs, there you might discuss the significance of the literacy events. What aspects of your life now can you trace to that event? How might your life be different if this event had not happened? I mean, these are questions to consider. Ways of organizing a literacy narrative, and we'll look at the formal outline in just a second, or in just a minute. So chronologically from beginning to end. Introducing the story, describing the setting and the people, telling what happened, say how the story was resolved, say something about the significance. And again, this seems to address writing about one literacy event. And you're probably going to be writing about several. Begin in the middle, which is exactly where Tania Barrientos begins. She begins in the middle and then moves back and flashback towards her childhood, beginning at the end. Tell how the story ends up and then introduce the subject. You know, in fall of 2015, I enrolled in an online section of English 1010. I was nervous, and these are the reasons why, and then through flashback, explain that. Okay, and some important notes on beginning, simply starting, jumping right in, get to the main action as quickly as possible. In the ending, refer back to the beginning. A good conclusions usually refer to the introductory paragraphs in some kind of a way. All right, so let's look at Tania Barrientos' essay, Se Habla Español. As I mentioned, Se Habla Español begins in the middle with her conversation with the man on the other end of the phone line is telling me the classes I've called about are first rate. Authors, writers make decisions about what words to put on the page. Why does Barrientos begin here? What effect does that have on the reader? Does it draw you into the story? Does it make you want to continue reading? That's what a good introduction does. It makes you want to continue reading the essay. And so you should ask, does that draw me in? Does that make me want to read more? And she moves down, she mentions this will be the 6th time I've signed up to learn the language my parents speak to each other. And then here she flashes back to when she was 3. I came to the United States in 1963 at age 3 with my family and immediately stopped speaking Spanish. When we talk about writing vivid details, why does Barrientos include this detail, and why is it important? And then the next details, college educated and seamlessly bilingual when they settled in West Texas. My parents, a psychology professor and an artist, wholeheartedly embraced the notion of the American melting pot. They declared that their 2 children would speak nothing but Inglés. They'd read in English, write in English, and fit into Anglo society beautifully. And then she kind of flashes forward. It sounds politically incorrect now. But she sticks with these details, right? Why are these details? Why is it important that she mentions her parents are bilingual? Why is it important that she mentions her parents are a psychology professor and an artist? Why does she mention that they would speak nothing but English? What do these details reveal about Barrientos, and how do these details contribute to the significance of her essay? Well, as I wrote in my summary, when she mentions that her parents, people have certain negative stereotypes towards immigrants, especially those from Mexico or South America, immigrants of Hispanic or Latin descent. Her details mentioning that her parents were college educated, that they're a psychology professor and an artist, help break those stereotypes. Also, the dialogue here. This detail. We'd been on vacation in Washington, D.C., visiting the Smithsonian, the Capitol, and the home of Edgar Allan Poe. In the Volkswagen on the way home, I'd memorized The Raven, and this happened when she was 7. And I would recite it with melodramatic flair to any poor soul duped into sitting through my performance. Listen, if you've ever read The Raven or tried to memorize a poem, and that one is especially long, you know how difficult that is. And here she is at 7 doing those things, right? And then when she mentions being on vacation in Washington, D.C., what is more American than going to the capital of the nation? So these details become important because they reveal how Tania Barrientos and her family break these stereotypes. They are not, as Donald Trump, frankly, everyone knows that he has called immigrants from Mexico as lazy, drug-dealing criminals. So Barrientos' essay works against those kinds of stereotypes. And then here we have dialogue in the next details. At the school's office, the registrar frowned when we arrived. Quote, the registrar says, "You people, you children are always behind, and you have the nerve to bring them in late?" "My children," my mother answered in a clear, curt tone, "will be at the top of their classes in 2 weeks. The registrar filed our cards, shaking her head. So when we talk about vivid details, when we talk about incorporating dialogue, what effect does this dialogue have on the reader? That is, if authors make choices every single day about what to include and not include, why is the dialogue important? Why does Barrientos choose to represent this in dialogue? Well, part of the answer might be that we really can see the registrar's attitude towards people of Latin descent through her exact words. And when we see the dialogue, we know that this is the registrar speaking, and we see her attitude. And she includes other details like her best friends and how she wanted to be white. She incorporates details. She learns Spanish, and how her friends view her, and how she's isolated from certain aspects of her culture because she can't speak Spanish. Okay, so this is a great example of a literacy narrative in that Barrientos is directly addressing how she perceives herself as a user of language. On Canvas, in the files, if you click on essay number 1, the folder, there are a variety of resources you can use to help you develop your literacy narrative. The literacy narrative free writing, the literacy narrative questions to answer. If you open those documents, you can read through them. You can answer these questions. You can begin writing about it. These questions can help you draft your essay. Nope, be oak. Literacy narrative questions to answer. What is significant about my experiences with language use, reading, writing, and speaking? What significant point do I want to make in my essay? What literacy events in my life help support the significant point I want to make? We're talking about, this is definitely questions you could answer in your introduction. I am asking you to turn in a formal outline. I like formal outlines because they provide a shape or direction to the essay. The formal outline that is due, I want to see that you're thinking about this essay. I want to see that you're developing this essay. So when it comes to the formal outline, the information that I need to see, that I want to see, are the elements that are bolded. So in the introduction, I want to see your thesis statement. What is the main idea? What is the main idea of your literacy narrative? What is significant about these literacy events? Body point 1, this should be, the first literacy event that you're discussing. The topic sentence, I want to see that. It should be the first sentence that tells the reader what this section of the essay is about. Body point 2, the second literacy narrative that you address. The topic sentence here should be a sentence that tells what this section of your essay is about. Body point 3, body point 4, and then the conclusion. One thing I do want to point out in the last few minutes is that this outline is, I view this outline as pretty fluid in that, if you discuss, 2 literacy events and you're at 5 pages, then you may not be discussing a third point or a fourth point. If you discuss a couple of literacy events and you're only at a page and a half, you're probably going to have to discuss a third and a fourth literacy event in order to meet the page requirements. Okay, so my point is, your particular outline or your particular essay may not use all 4 of these body points. You may only use 2 or 3, but you should not have more than 4. One other thing that I want to point out that's important to remember: this is college. You may have used a formal outline like this in high school or middle school or elementary, where each Roman numeral here was a paragraph. And so in many ways, this, in college, each one of these Roman numerals becomes a section in your essay, and each one of these is probably going to be 2 or 3 paragraphs. Okay, so your introduction, and those are broad guidelines. Your introduction may be only 1 paragraph. It might be 2 paragraphs. Each body point should be a couple of paragraphs. Your conclusion may be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Okay, in your conclusion, you should summarize your main points. You should try to answer this question so much, which speaks to the significance of the essay. Okay, that hits the main points about essay number 1. And, I'm at this is getting kind of long now. So if you have specific questions, feel free to email me at george@dixie.edu or send me a message via Canvas, and I will address that. Okay, so I'm trying to find my record button to turn it off. All right. You guys have a good afternoon, and happy writing. So now you're going to see me trying to find that particular button that I can no longer see on my desktop. Oh, and here's another helpful resource about writing vivid details that you can incorporate. Where is... Okay, so this is frustrating, I know. Let me just start shutting these down. This is actually getting kind of embarrassing now. But you're seeing my screen. Where did the thing go? There it is. Alright, have a good weekend. Email me if you have questions.